I'm in a really ranty mood right now, so like this video isn't going to have any structure. I might delete this video in like a day because of the secondhand embarrassment. But basically, I just want to talk about like, or really just like rant out loud the whole like a lot of the anti-intellectual like fake deep like pseudo philosophical bullshit that I hear throughout like basically all of the SMT and Persona fan base. Like, I'm not an SMT elitist. I'm not like a modern Persona fanboy. Like whatever bullshit you want to say to like demean whatever arguments you don't like. I'm just like someone who has played like almost every SMT game and Persona game, and basically the crux of like what I want to say is that like a lot of the antagonists and potential antagonists that Atlas writes are just like not good, like across pretty much every game. Like, I'm gonna start with Chaos and Law from like the SMT series because it's like the easiest to go after, and then I'm gonna go like talk about the Persona games. So like Chaos is basically always just like the most boring, like again, like fake deep, like it's just social Darwinism. Like that's it. Like might makes right, like slay, kill whoever you want, like yeah, go off queen, whatever. And like I understand why a lot of people like Chaos because Lucifer is like the best character in the SMT series. Then there are characters like Walter who are really cool, like Chiaki is sympathetic, like yeah, okay, I get it, whatever. But that's like all they have going for them. Like the ideology, which is what the SMT games like are about, it's just bullshit. Like just kill whoever you want, whatever, have fun, slay. Like don't think about like compassion or like the fact that we are like intelligent beings, like whatever, just like be an animal basically. It's so boring. Like almost nothing interesting gets done with it. I'm gonna go and transition to like Devil Survivor Overclocked because it's like basically the only game in the entire series that does things like genuinely well while having multiple endings. So then there's Law, which like a lot of people pretend like actually SMT4 is the only game where like Law is really a genocide or whatever. Like no, it's not. Like I'm sorry, it's just not. Like basically every SMT game is either like Law is either genocide or it's like forced brainwashing, or it's like this totalitarian state. Like it's one of those three. And even then, it's like they all bleed into each other if you actually think about it, or if you know like anything about how history works. Like it's just boring. Like in Strange Journey, it's like yeah, you brainwash people with like Zelenin's song or whatever. In SMT4, you just do genocide straight up. In like SMT3, there's not really like a law path, but it's basically just like the closest thing is like Hikawa, who's like wanting to merge everyone into like this single harmonic entity where like nothing happens. It's like okay, that's like an interesting thing to do. But Nocturne is like the worst example of like everything being so fucking stupid because it's like they just make the characters as unlikable as possible, which I know is something a lot of people are like, well, actually, they did that intentionally because you're supposed to focus on their ideologies. They couldn't have written good characters who also have ideologies you want to listen to and potentially follow. They have to be unlikable. Like, no, like in the first 2 minutes of the game, you get your magazine stolen, and like your friends are like insulting you for no fucking reason. And they're like, yeah, go get murdered in this basement real quick. Like, no. And you want me to like go on your side when you become a social Darwinist and when you become an incel? No, I'm killing you. Fucking fry Kugel to the face. Like, it's so fucking annoying and stupid. Like, Hakawa is like interesting, but he's also just an asshole. And people are like, well, in the freedom ending, you get to be your own person. But like, no, in the freedom ending, you're doing exactly what Yuko is telling you to do without like, also without thinking of yourself. It's just that Yuko is so like, she's basically just an emotional leech who like needs you to do her shit for her because she's like too weak of a person. She got the wrong like sponsor basically. Like Aradia is an interesting character. I very much like Aradia. She's like basically the only likable person in the entire game. But like she has like two lines of dialogue and then she just leaves. And then Yuko is like, "Oh, I'm so useless. Can you do this for me?" Like, okay, I guess. Like I always do the freedom ending when I play because like I just do it for myself. Like that's what I would do in real life. That's how I play those games. It's like the only decent option. Because the true demon ending is like, yeah, you get to kill God and like be your edgy, like deviant art, OC power fantasy, whatever. But you're still just being Lucifer's lapdog. And it's like, okay, like fighting the fiends is fun. I always do that. But like the ending, it's just annoying. Anyway, like Devil Survivor Overclocked is like the only game that actually does shit seriously. And like Overclocked absolutely does have like a lot of Persona 5, like we need to re-explain every single thing for the player like a million times just in case they take a 6 week break in between every major cutscene. It has a lot of that, but Overclocked is still really good overall. Because like in the Chaos route, It's like it's basically just about like killing God, and that's it. It's not like social Darwinism is really cool. Like now he is definitely fine with that. Kaido is a bad character, but he's definitely fine with that. And like in the eighth day, it's cool because you're like, do you just want to kill God? Do you also, or do you want to be like this tyrant who just rules over everyone and basically who just takes God's place? But we're not self-aware about that. That's interesting. Like it's kind of like a fake deep choice still because it's like, do you want to be good or do you want to be evil? But like at least it's something. Like you have the option to be like dumb. But and then the law ending in Overclocked is still bad. Like a lot of people are like, well, it's actually like the best law ending, so it's fine. And like, yeah, it is the best law ending, but that's not saying anything like at all. It's like you can get food poisoning or you can die. So anyway, like Amane's route is probably the most interesting in terms of the writing. Like I had a really great time playing through it for the first time, especially its eighth day. But it's still basically like totalitarianism because of it's basically like a theocratic totalitarian state, but like God is more chill in this entry, and Amane and the main character are like nice people on this route. Therefore, like it's okay. Sparkle emoji. That's basically what it is. But like again, it's still interesting, and I feel like it's good enough so that like some people could actually like be okay with it. Like they don't get into the whole like okay, how much of the Bible is true Amane? Like they don't get into stuff like that beyond like the Cain and Abel story. But like it's fine. Like I know I'm kind of rambling at this point, but like that's fine. So like my main complaint is just that like no, like these games are not like as deep as people act like they are. I know I haven't gone into like SMT 1 and 2 very much, but like SMT 1 is basically the same thing. It's just that like oh no, my girlfriend died or I got beat up by like gang members, so I'm going to be a social Darwinist or like stand God or whatever the fuck. Like SMT 2 I think is also pretty useful. I mean, interesting, but it's still basically just like in the law ending you commit genocide for literally no reason, even though you just killed God because he wants to do genocide, I'm pretty sure. Like SMT2 is the only one I haven't actually played I mean SMT2 is the only one I haven't actually played very much, so maybe I'm talking out of my ass there. But anyway, I'm moving on to the modern Persona games because I'm 7 minutes through this somehow. Like or really just the Persona games in general cuz like okay, I've I considered making like a clapback video against this, but I get like 2 views per video. It's not worth the effort, you know, love yourself or whatever. But there was like this one video kind of recently about like how Persona 1 is like a good game, but like when you actually watch the video, the guy is basically just being like, the game's like antagonist and like a lot of the things that happen are like super surface level and the characters don't like they don't really develop or go anywhere and stuff like that. And that's just like so blatantly untrue because you have to like deliberately approach the game in the way that like it very clearly is not asking you to. It's like playing Disco Elysium and like having to complain that you have to like read and think about politics. Like I'm sorry, that's the game you signed up for. Anyway, like I'm not going to act as though like Kondori, the main antagonist of Persona 1, is like great or anything because he's definitely not, but like he's not one dimensional or anything. He's basically just like a caricature of like why nihilism is stupid. So like no, he's not the best antagonist ever, but he's basically an interesting way to like analyze how like if all you actually want is power and you really don't care about anything or anyone else aside from that, then like yeah, I guess you can accomplish a lot of things, but you're not actually going to be satisfied at all. And I think that's really cool and like basically timeless because it shows that like you know, just take Elon Musk for example. Like he has all the money, like basically all the power you could ever want, or just like any fucking president or like really prominent politician. Like if you know anything about them, like they're the most miserable people ever, and like having the first antagonist of like the entire Persona game go into that, I think is really cool, and it's like a really missed opportunity for a video like that to just be like, yeah, he's just one dimensional, he just wants power, and that's it. Like it just did a really big disservice. And then like Pandora, the final boss, is basically just like suicide manifested. It's kind of like Herberus from the answer Persona 3. So like yeah, obviously she's just meant to be like an interesting like final boss. I'm not interesting. She's just meant to be a final boss basically because Kandori literally eats shit and dies. Now that said, Persona 1 definitely is not great when it comes to the writing or the character development. Like you have to deliberately like talk to the characters like between like in different rooms like during boss fights or like during dungeons and stuff like that. Like most characters don't actually develop very much. So like that part's true, but they still do like if you bother to talk to them like again like that pissed me off. Anyway, like Persona 2 is like the antagonists really don't deliver there either. And like Eternal Punishment's my second favorite game of all time. Like my favorite is The Sims 3, which doesn't have a narrative. So like effectively, Eternal Punishment's my favorite. But it's like, okay, so they have Tatsuzo, who's just like a crazy person. They have yeah, they have Tatsuya Sudo, who is a crazy person. They have Tatsuzo, who's like a crazy cultist guy who you barely see at all. They have Kandori brought back from the dead, who is actually really interesting because he like acknowledges the faults in his ideology, but he feels like he's too far gone to like do anything about it. That's really interesting. You don't see a lot like from him. You see more of him in like Tatsuya's additional scenario, but it's still pretty interesting. At least like it's something. And but then you have like Nyarlathotep, who I think Nyarlathotep is like the most interesting his character concept could have possibly gotten, but it's still like a lot of Persona 2 fans are going to come after me, like all five of us. But he's still like, I don't know. I just think he's kind of, I just think it's lame. Like they did the best that they could, but I think it's lame because he's literally just like he's the amalgamation of like all the bad parts of humanity. Like Philemon is actually really cool because he's like the best parts of humanity, but that also includes like pride and overconfidence and things like that. Like that's why he accepted like the bet that put everything into motion in the first place. And then you have Persona 3, which is just like there's Strega who I mean Reload like is going to come out in like 10 hours at least in my time zone, so like I don't know, maybe I shouldn't be talking like right maybe I shouldn't be talking yet, but they're basically just like these cultists who believe that like a death is a deliverance, which is something that's been done like a million times before. Like it's basically never done in a way that's like particularly interesting. They have like no real growth or development. They don't really like they just don't do anything interesting besides being like, yeah, it's cool if we kill people actually. Like Chidori goes through an arc over the course of like 5 scenes ever, and it's pretty lame because it's basically just like, oh, I don't want to die actually, but like I thought I did, and I don't want to be attached to people because I need to die. And that's basically it. Like it's so lame. And then you have like Akutsuki, who's like a surprise bad guy, but he's the same way. It's just really lame and disappointing. Um, I honestly would have liked to see more of like Mitsuru's father, like because he wanted to create like a time machine basically, and he also thought that death was a deliverance, which are kind of like low key incompatible ideas. But whatever, Persona 3, do your thing, I guess. Um, like Ryoji is really interesting though, because he was like made by the like protagonist basically, and then he was like, yeah, actually, like death has to come, so just like be really peaceful, and he really wants you to like kill him and get the bad ending because he doesn't want you to suffer. And like that's an interesting idea. You don't see a lot from it, but I don't think it's really necessary to, so like okay. But then Persona 4 is like, again, I know a lot of people are going to be like, well, actually Adachi is interesting because like he's like an incel, but like he actually does this shit that incels do. He's like a murderer. That's like crazy, bro. He's like really well written. But like no, not really. Like Adachi's interesting in the sense that he's like sympathetic, I guess, but he's more pathetic than that. Like again, he's just like some guy who's like really bored and he's an incel and he wants to kill people and that's it. Like in the Persona 4 Arena games, he kind of goes through an arc, and his inner narration in like the Adachi episode was cool to play through because he's basically like trying to make amends in his own like very warped, prideful way. That's cool, but that's not in like Persona 4 itself. And then you have like Nadatame, who's basically just like manipulated. He barely has a character of his own. And then you have Izanami, who is just like the typical like modern Persona game head ass. I want to like kill everyone, but in like my version of like a good and just way. It's just so lame. And then Persona 5, basically every single villain is like the most cookie cutter I'm evil head ass ever, and it's really lame. Like this is going to be the most controversial thing I have to say, probably ever. Maruki is not a great antagonist. Sorry, that's just my opinion. And the main reason why is because, like, first of all, like, this is a minor thing, but his motivation is, like, the most bland cookie cutter bullshit they possibly could have done. Like, oh no, my girlfriend got attacked and then she was traumatized. That's so sad. Like, but anyway, the main reason why I don't like Maruki is because his, like, the entire third semester is just so lame and disappointing. Like, they never grapple with the fact that actually, world hunger, poverty, genocide, all of those things would be no more in Maruki's world. Maruki never tells anybody that. The main characters never wrestle with that. It's all super surface level. Like, oh, my mom is back alive. My dad's back alive. I'm having so much fun with my track mates. And, like, you have, like, 8 of the exact same Third Awakening scene, like, 8 days in a row, basically, where the character's like, I'm sorry, I want it to be part of this like fake reality, even though it's like literally objectively real right now. So I don't know why we always call it fake. Like, you can disagree with the reality and say Maruki's in the wrong. I agree with you, but it's not because he's like fucking letting you be with your trackmates again. Like, that's not the point here. He's violating people's autonomy. He's forcing them to settle for less. Like, nobody should be in charge of like other people like that. Like, this is a side tangent, but like I saw a lot of people like defend the like Disney's Wish villain or whatever. I haven't seen that movie. It's probably dog shit, but like I've seen a lot of like the most brain dead takes about it where people are like, "Well, actually it's good if like the sorcerer guy is like in charge of everybody's wishes and he can take away the bad ones. Like that'll just lead to a more peaceful society." Like, maybe one person having absolute power over people's desires is a bad thing actually. Like, I can't convince you of that if that's something you disagree with. But I feel like as a rule, that's just how it is. Like, anyway, that's basically the only thing that I had to say. That's why I wanted to make this video. If you've somehow for some reason watched this entire thing, I hope you were on 2 times speed. Good for you. Okay, bye.